Welcome to One Word Stories. Today, episode 4. And I'm really happy and thrilled to host Brett Parry. Brett Parry from exactly, and this is exactly where the struggle kicks in. Originally from Australia, based in the US, in Chicago. And Chicago, by the way, is the second biggest Polish city worldwide, second biggest after Warsaw. And this is exactly also the Polish connection. You are married to a wonderful woman from Poland and you speak fluent Polish, Brett. Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry, jak się mamy? Dziękuję bardzo, witam serdecznie. Tak, ja mam piękne polskie żonę, tak, dziękuję.
Wonderful. So, Brett, this is exactly the point with the question, where are you from? The very tricky question, especially for people who actually have such a mosaic of identities, cultural identities. However, before we dive into the theme, I would like to congratulate you on the new president, and actually twice. So, congratulations on the new US president. Fantastic.
Yes,
Very great, hope for everybody in the field. New
yes.
era starts. And congratulations on your position as the president of SIETAR USA. You just took over in January this year.
That's correct. Yes. Very blessed to be taking on that responsibility of this wonderful organization that you and I are both a part of, and enjoy the connections and the camaraderie and the the professional, but also the personal enrichment we get from that. It's one that I know we both enjoy and share, and it is wonderful. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So, Brad, you introduce yourself as a cultural mentor, as the designer, or better say, architect of career.
Mm-hmm.
You are a passionate interculturalist. What actually would you answer to someone just like me,
Sure.
um, to the question where you are from and who is actually Brett Parry?
Sure. Well, my accent gives me up no matter where I am in the world. I have a very typical Australian accent, and I do hail from the great shores of Australia, Tara Australis, born in the land, on the land, and to affirm the traditional owners of the land that I come from. I was born as a guest on the land of the Duduk people in Australia. The Aboriginal community is an important part and the traditional owners of the land, and so I always like to affirm that as well. But I do, obviously, I was born there. It's my home. It is always going to be my home. So, and I'm very proud to do that. But of course, I now live in Chicago. I moved here 20 years ago, and as you mentioned, I met a wonderful Polish girl here, and we have built our family. And this is where I hail from here, although I am still very global. So I tell people that I really am from the world. I enjoy having a base in Poland, in Europe in general, in Australia as well, and here in Chicago, kind of in the middle, with no family, no direct family here with us, but still connected to a lot of different people around the world that are family, whether it be by blood or just connection. Yeah. So, so I came up with this term, cultural mentor, as a way of communicating to people that what I want to do is not tell people what to do. I want to encourage them to tell me what they need to do to support their own global aspirations. And so when we're working with international executives and their families and people that are doing business around the world, is just to be that person in the corner to reflect and help them explore their own knowledge and expand their horizons. And the career architect is, I'm a big believer in actually using expertise when you when you perhaps are struggling. So if I was to build a house, there's no way in the world I'd design it. It'd probably fall down pretty quickly. But the design of it itself, I know what I like. I know the way I want it to look. But I would use an architect to actually bring the expertise to put the walls up, design the walls, placements and things like that. So that's kind of another idea I came up with, is that I just want to be that person who's a bit of an advisor to say, what are your goals? What are your aspirations? And how can we build the foundations and the walls and the roof, but also put some big windows in there, so you're not restricted, big windows and big doors, so you're not restricted to the space, but it is a home that you can always come back to and center yourself in. So if that makes sense, then it seems to make sense to a lot of clients, so I go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, when I listen to you, describing also house, home, and switching these terms, what does it actually acquire for someone who moves pretty often? Let's put it as an expat, but also for migrants, maybe not so frequently, but still, migrating from one familiar culture to a new place. Refugees as well. All these people are actually just moving around. It's just that whenever we use these words, we automatically have certain stories, expectations, assumptions in our heads. Yeah. So what does it actually mean for a person, based on your experience, to turn the house into the home?
Yeah, right. No, I think about the home as a base, not a. It's a physical place, and it's a place where you should be able to have comfort in and safety, security. And the home doesn't have to be a physical place. That home can be a spiritual place if you're connected, like some of the indigenous communities around the world talk about this, and the Aboriginal community in Australia talks about this, a spiritual place, not a place that is has boundaries. But so it is very personal, I think, and I love your concept of story. When I'm talking about this with my clients, it's just to actually have them think about their story as their home. What is the comfortable story they tell themselves, right? And how can you then push the boundaries of that story to expand and embrace the new cultures that you're going into, and make them a part of the story, not forget your own story, keep your own story, and then build on that narrative with your experience and your knowledge and your wisdom as you grow in the global world. So to me, it's not very tangible, it's not while I have a home here in Chicago, and we have a home in Poland, and we have a home in Australia, those places might or might not contain a physical place, but to me they are places that we feel home. But also I can walk out of here and tell my story, which is my home as well, and give people an insight into where I'm from without having to show them.
Yeah, a wonderful metaphor. Yeah, that actually home is also inside me when I share stories.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. I have moved a little bit from, this metaphor you use in the professional context, that it's also the career architect about building the house, towards this global context. However, when I listen to you, I can imagine that we can also transfer it, to this professional context as well, that it's really about, especially right now, since the challenges of last year, that many people are re-narrating what is actually important, what is actually working best in their lives, and really finding also, so to say, home in terms of finding completely new, or just adapting to the rapid changes in the professional context, of finding a new job, a new position, and so on. It's also about the mindset. Yeah. How can we actually thrive in this really challenging times? And this guides me to the question, what was actually this one word that helped you personally in 2020?
Sure. Well, you asked me this in real time a few weeks back, and I immediately thought of the word horizon. it's always been a word that resonates with me as a place that on the surface looks like a limit. You know, we use these words beyond the horizon. Once I reach the horizon, I can see the horizon, and because the world is round, at least for most of us, with you know, some scientific framework around that, it is a round place. So therefore, there is always going to be a horizon. The horizon meets the sky, and so there's a boundary between the sky. So people say the sky is the limit. Well, there's really no limit to the sky, and I think there's no limit to the horizon. So the reason I came up with that is that I, as a child growing up in the playground that I grew up in, and I really do say that, I was very fortunate to grow up with a playground of abundance, and that included being at the beach. Okay, so as an Australian, we spend a lot of time at the beach, and I would always walk into the water and go as fast as I can to be able to get to a spot where I could actually have my feet leave the sand, right? Leave the land. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what it was about that, but I remembered when I thought about horizon is that once I swam out and that sensation of lifting your feet and floating, the possibility then was I could swim anywhere. I could go anywhere. There was no limit to my horizon. I could keep swimming, and eventually I'd end up on some type of land, right? And I think so when we're now confronted with these situations where we're restricted in at least in a physical sense in some ways to a space that we call home or we call our house, then we still don't have to forget the fact that just outside the door, just outside the window, there's still an horizon, there's still a possibility. And of course, we have technology now, especially with what we're doing here, right? We have the technology to be able to reach over those horizons and connect with people in probably even a deeper way than we did, and appreciate those people for who and what they represent in our lives. So it's a big word. Horizon is a big word because horizons are always a long way away. They seem a long way away, but they're always going to be a long way away. But the possibility of discovery is always there. So then again, that becomes a metaphor for embedding in you the story of how you're going to navigate these horizons as you go out into the world, and you know, still be grounded, still be able to go back and put your foot back on the sand when you get tired of the swimming, when you get weary, and you get and maybe it's through sickness or other things like that, but still know that that's always going to be there in some way, shape, or form. So, I mean, all that makes sense to me, and I try and I articulate that to clients in a way that for them fits them. My story is my story. Their story has to be formed from their own sense of being, but using just a simple metaphors allows them to kind of again using that terminology as an architect. So let's build the foundation first, right? Let's look at you, look at who you are, and then see, you know, you really have in you the ability to stretch your boundaries and go over and reach for the horizon.
Yeah, definitely. What I really love about this approach is really this emphasis on expanding the comfort zone, not really leaving the comfort zone and what will happen next, but really expanding. Yeah. So I immediately picture you, Brett, in Australia on the beach, really, you know, enjoying the freedom.
Yes, yeah. Well, and you mentioned though, you know, again, I've had a lot of privilege, as we all have, to leave our homeland in comfort and security with options, with choices, but understanding that those choices are not always the same for other people. So I'm certainly no expert when it comes to thinking and understanding the plight of people like refugees that are displaced through their lack of choice. But I think if I was going to meet them, I would like to hear that story first. I would like to hear that experience and what it means for them, and then possibly work in the idea of saying, but don't forget your homeland is always just over the horizon. There is, and you can bring all the aspects and the richness of your culture that still live in you, and you can still communicate that to the world and express that to the world and do real good in the world with your experience to help mankind understand just the effects of what we do as humans on other people when we interact with them, and I mean, some of the negative impacts of humanity when it comes to that kind of dynamic. So for me, it can be used for anybody, but I certainly don't want to assume that I have the understanding of those communities, because that would be very presumptuous. So I'm always listening. Again, you know, it's really listening, and this is again with story. It is about listening as much as it is as telling, and really hearing a person's heart and soul when it comes to how they describe themselves and their place in the world.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, because, you know, while you were talking about this huge challenge of reacting immediately instead of listening, this is actually something that I personally witnessed in a conversation with a refugee, a very, very smart young man who was fluent in several languages, experienced awful stories, the place of his birth, and moved to France. You know, at one point, after sharing so many stories and really very, very tough experiences, he told me, "Joanna, what should I do? How can I act that I'm not reduced to this one set of stories, just this one strong narrative, you know, like having a label, this is a refugee."
Right.
And this was exactly the moment when I said, hey, silence, you know, because this is a big, big process for such traumatic stories really to evolve and really to give space also to different set of stories, also to give space to new stories that will come at one point. And as long as they are so strong and so present, I guess it's really hard to accelerate the process. What is the moment for you that you say, oh, okay, right now, stop talking, start listening? And how do you make sure that you are this really um, attentive, good story listener?
Sure. I think it's when I recognize that I have biases coming to mind, you know, when I have the mindset that something is triggering me, whether it be negative or positive, when I'm hearing something that throws up biases to me, and resist that temptation to be the savior, be the person who can give you advice. I'm going to tell you exactly what you should do, and this kind of thing. You know, there's an app we're using at the moment called Clubhouse. It's it is by its core an auditory app. There's no video on it. It's a social media platform where people are talking and listening. And as I'm listening into a lot of these conversations, there's a lot of experts that are telling, let me tell you what to do. Let me tell you how you should approach this problem. And I know full well they haven't really listened to the person. They've got skill sets and they've got great knowledge. They've got great understanding of what's worked for them, but they are using very, very simple terminology without really listening. And that's not everybody. So I just know that as I'm listening to people, I want to respond in a way that recognizes that my bias is what my bias is through the lens of my privilege or my particular experience. And then, you know, so then move it into the frontal cortex and be very curious. Questions, more questions, you know, open questions, and really dig in. And so through that process, and I'm not an expert in psychology or anything like that. I just like to I'm genuinely interested in the experience, because anything I can learn from this particular person helps me also working with the next person. Mm-hmm. So I tell people that it's not, I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to learn from you. And that changes the dynamic of the discussion. Now, why am I here to learn from you? I'm here to learn from you who you are and what your aspirations are. So if you're willing to have me offer some advice, I'm happy to do it. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to actually hope that you tell yourself what you can do and in your own lens. So that is really a different structure for me that just works for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody, but it, you know, after working with hundreds and hundreds of globally mobile people from all kinds of walks of life and socioeconomic levels and education levels, that's what's worked for me. And this is why I enjoy this work so much. No 2 days are the same. Even the presence of working with somebody, and as you know, in this format, we're on the video here, and you and I know each other. We've known each other for a number of years professionally, so that's comfortable, right? This is not a scary situation for me. But when a complete stranger comes up on this screen, we don't know what mindset they're in the process of their journey. So we have to be very intentional about understanding that and looking at the cues. And of course, you know, we're restricted in the physical sense in doing it over a video, but we're not restricted in the personal sense of asking questions and curiosity, which again, as you said, so rightly said, I think it's great to understand that we're talking about expanding horizons. We're talking about pushing the limits, pushing your limits of your ability. And that's why I kind of really appreciate the stories of refugees, is that the resilience of the human spirit has been shown over many, many millennia, that it is a very, very strong, we have a very strong ability to process these changes, even though in the most difficult circumstances, it might seem that we're just beyond hope. But there is always hope and new horizons.
Yeah, definitely. And also build upon the stories so that we can move forward.
That's
and
right.
We don't get stuck in this one dominant story that is currently overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Brett, what was the moment 2020 that you actually expanded your horizon and that you recall as really this jump into just very, very cold water?
Well, I was very fortunate. Again, a lot of privileges that even before the current situation with the pandemic, I got a sense that a lot of my clients wanted a different approach, and what was working for me was a different approach, and that was through flexibility and the ability to be in control of their own destiny, and that comes down to the true sense of actually working with them. So, virtual interactions was something that I was always very interested in, and so I'd expanded that. So, you know, I'm again very lucky. I didn't really find myself treading water in a cold pond or a cold ocean. Ask my clients how have they processed this. They can tell me the physical of what they've done. You know, well, we did this and we did that and we couldn't travel here and we missed this and missed that. But then I want to know, well, tell me what that means to you. How have you processed that? How have you made that? How has it made you feel? Because I'm working with them going to a new country, then I can bring that in as an example of saying, well, just imagine that in your new country. Just imagine that same feeling, and was there a better way that you could process those feelings of the impact of culture and the differences that you've come across already, and transfer that the successful things you've done, possibly question the things that you thought were negative. So for me, that's that's the change. It's given us more tools to help our clients understand the potential difficulties of working and interacting and building respect for people that you work with in the foreign realm.
Definitely, yes. And definitely when I listen to you, and you know, you've got such a charming way of encouraging people to expand their comfort zone. It's not only about challenges, it's also about chances.
Yep.
So whatever move, and again, if it's migration, relocation, It has got also lots of chances. We don't see them sometimes at the first sight, but then this abundance is really wow, overwhelming at one point if we allow ourselves to accept that one can have different homes, not only different houses, but also
Mm,
different homes, just like you said at the very, very beginning.
yeah.
And just one comment regarding the challenges of inclusion, also in the virtual context. I still remember I was watching to a fantastic documentary film about Aboriginal people in Australia, and unisono, all of them, they said the moment we could raise our voice and our voice was heard was the turning point because
Mm,
there were finally people who were willing to listen to our stories and not to perceive us through all this, biases, conscious, unconscious, and stereotypes, generalizations, whatever term
sure.
we are going to use. And actually, when I transfer this challenge to the virtual context, this is exactly the point that
Mm,
sometimes this exclusion takes place not because of differences in power, so to say, not because of, different cultural backgrounds. That these people are more proactive, these people are more reserved, and so on and so forth because me myself I experienced lots of people from very group oriented cultures who were extremely proactive in the virtual space, and the point is really that the technical literacy, digital literacy, varies
sure.
from person to person. So how can we make sure that we add this one more, let's say, new cultural layer additionally to obviously race, ethnicity, age, gender, and so on and so forth. Of course, also social educational background.
Mm.
This digital literacy. Do you have any best practices how to include people in the virtual space?
Well, that's it's a very big concept to be able to communicate that. But I think that when and I'm somebody who people kind of somehow look at, because I'm visible in the social media space. I do a daily show with a colleague of mine and so we're visible in the digital space, and so people sort of think, well, how are you doing that? I want to learn that. I want to know what it is that makes it, what drives you to do that. So, forgetting the reasons behind it, we can talk about that. But it is that people say, oh, this technology is scary, it's intimidating. And so it's intimidating for different people on different levels. Okay. So understanding that that can be cultural, it can be a cultural digital divide. And as I write advice or give advice to people, I say, just explore your own cultural preferred style and see how you can best, and bring those wonderful skills to the virtual space, because
Hmm.
they all have application. When it comes to the technology, we don't all have the access to the same technology. I'm a shiny penny guy. I'll buy the latest gadget that I can get my hands on, and so I've got a drawer full of it, and it's cords rolled up and things like that. But I understand that not many people, either that through resources or just the access to those things.
Definitely. By the way, I tried out really one cool method in the meeting when there were actually two participants who dominated the discussions, and from the very beginning, we were more or less agreeing that every story counts, to encourage all of them to draw a cake, a round cake,
Yeah.
and to divide this cake into as many pieces as participants in the room, and to just think what they think, what was the part of their contributions in the cake.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're
So
actually physically drawing something that represents their perception of how much they or the I guess the space they took up in the conversation. That's a great way.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And also the others. Yeah. And
yeah. Sure.
it was exactly the moment when everybody started to laugh. Yeah, because they immediately knew
I knew.
yeah, what this cake would look like, So there are some moments when actually we can still be very inclusive, very diplomatic, yeah,
Yes.
but really a little bit nail the challenge in the process.
Yes. Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. And that's why, when we work with tools, and I had this experience yesterday with a client who said, that not all of this is culture, right? And I said, I understand that. And, he was it was great because he was pushing back against some of the concepts I was saying. But I said, remember, I'm using the words general all the
yeah,
time. In general, this is what you might find, because I know people have different personalities. But what I do say is that if you're confronted with somebody, like in that case, you could obviously say, "Hey, listen, you're always talking. You need to be quiet," and that becomes a discomfort for that person. They've been confronted and they might be embarrassed in some way, shape, or form. But a fun exercise that can be brought up in that example, or through the lens of of the potential cultural style that they've discovered through an assessment tool, is it becomes non-threatening. It becomes not a matter of right or wrong, but a matter of right and left. And both are valid, both are right, both work in the context of their culture. But understanding it then becomes a point of laughter. I've had clients say, yeah, we've had some of the biggest laughs understanding who we are as people and going, I recognize myself in that. Sometimes I just can't shut up, So I need to realize that I've got other people that I need that really deserve respect, and I deserve to hear from them. That's the thing. It's like, I deserve their knowledge. I deserve to understand who they are and what they come from. And that's a different way of thinking of it. It's not an accusatory process. It's an enriching process to understand that and be faced with it. I think it's a great
yeah.
exercise. Yeah.
Brett, however, you've been practicing listening skills with Christian Höferle in your show to
Yes.
Chaps many cultures for right now. Oh, more than half a year, is it
Well, it's actually,
right?
we're up to our episode 144 today, will be later on today. And 144 divided by 5, loose arithmetic comes into play there. And so we're talking 28 weeks of
Wow.
non-stop daily weekday episodes where we have guests, or we might be just Christian and I just bloviating over what we think the world should be. And I guess that's an example where the pandemic actually forced us to do that. We understood that we were going to have a little bit of extra time in our hands at home, in our
Yeah.
studios, our
Yeah.
respective studios. And so why not take advantage of the privilege that we have to bring voices in, right? And have people come and talk to us about their expertise, and do it on a daily basis is like, okay, we started it and thought, well, we'll try it out and we'll see how it goes. But it sometimes that has been very challenging. It has been, but we've always made the commitment to do it, and we've encouraged each other to do it.
Fantastic. I love it. And I love your willingness to dive always in this cold water and expand the horizon, just sticking to your metaphor.
Yeah.
Because actually, we could also at one point this discussion, what does it mean to experiment and to say farewell to perfectionism? Yeah? Going live
Yes.
with such
Yes.
a
Yeah.
format is a little bit different than recording, editing, and putting it
Right.
in this to the space. Yeah.
Absolutely, because the recording, I mean, I can be a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to this stuff, and I will sit for hours and try and edit little things, and I know it's very restrictive. That's my story, is that I go, it's so frustrating to me to do that, and sometimes that results in me just not doing it at all. So
Yeah.
it it causes the fact that I don't put anything out there. Now, when you're just doing it live, you have no choice. It's hit the button. You know, we're going live. It's live TV, people. And we've had failures. We've had guests that their internet connection has fallen off. Our internet connection has fallen off. The noise has been different. But you know, we're talking to an audience that hopefully understands that and can see in real time just the effects and how to handle this discombobulation of being confronted with things that go wrong in real time and having to navigate your way through them. So it's a wonderful, to me, it's been a wonderful experiment that so far has worked out. You know, and although we've been cognizant of what culture they come from, some people have said, now, can you give us some questions ahead of time, you know? And we've gone, well, can we suggest that we don't do that? Other people, we can say, don't be silly. We're just going to go live. We know you and we know your ability. So then, you know, do it. So we have to be respectful. But I can tell you, every guest we've had on, every time, has embraced that. They've gone live. They've been willing to just go with the flow. And again, lift that little foot from the terra firma and swim out into the ocean and just float and see where we end up.
Fantastic. I wish you all the best for your show, all the best for your presidency.
Thank you.
Just one word for the very end. What is your one most important word for the presidency for SIETAR USA?
Well, I think horizon is the same thing. I use that intentionally. So horizon is it. It is the ability to, SIETAR globally is a brand and an organization that has been around for a lot of years. It was started here in the US, but now it's a global brand and a global organization with wonderful people with different backgrounds. So but it still suffers, just like any organization, from the restrictive mindset of saying we just need to do things the same way, and this has worked so far, and let's stick to that. And we're going through, I think, growth pains, and that will always happen. So I think the ability to sit back and say, well, maybe we need to do a bit of a renovation to get back to the architect side, right? Let's renovate, and especially when it comes to the inclusion of people. We're an intercultural organization, and yet we a lot of times fail to do the very thing we teach people to do, and that is to be inclusive and listen and bring the voices of diversity into it. Because it's uncomfortable to hear these voices. It's uncomfortable to have these discussions, but and I'm uncomfortable having the discussions. But we have to have these discussions. It's not a matter of, well, that'd be nice to do. It's a matter of we need to do it, and we need to do it yesterday, because we've seen the result of not doing that for the past 4 years in this country of the US, where it's been about borders and walls and discrimination and hate, to the extent of hate. And we've seen this story before in this world, and it hasn't ended in a very pretty way. And we need to do that as an organization. So if I can facilitate that in some way, shape or form, as the servant leader I hope to be, then my job will be done.
Brett Parry, I wish you lots of positive energy for this transformation. And as I know, SIETAR and SIETArians, you have a fantastic support around.
Yes.
So everything is heading into this smooth transformation.
Thank you.
And I'm crossing my fingers like that. Whatever culture.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for having me. It's been great, Joanna. It's very good to see you. Dziękuję bardzo. Proszę.
Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.